aux power circuit. This can be used for door holder power, constant power, and resettable power. Also has on board 4 configurable relays. These are preset. We'll talk about those momentarily. One of the better features about the 4064 control panel is the fact that it does have the common P-Link or RS-45 bus that supports the same system accessories that our addressable control panels support. And we'll go through all those here in a second. Has built-in Ethernet port, which you can upload and download the configuration file through this port. It is also used as a UL-listed IP communicator. In addition to that, you can use the email capabilities of the control panel through this port. Has a 4x20 character display status with your common system LEDs, such as power, earth fault, silence, alarm, trouble, and supervisory. It is programmable via the laptop, which is what we prefer. However, you can do keypad programming through it as well. So again, we totally prefer for this to be programmed via the laptop because it gives you the chance to be able to see exactly what's going on with the system. What we're going to cover in this webinar is just a little bit of the installation of the 4064 control panel, the accessory cards. I would say a typical panel startup. I'll give you a glimpse of the programming, but we don't really dive into the programming. The reason why that is because the programming for this is going to be very similar to the programming of our addressable control panels. And that's where I would say if you want to know more about the programming, I would suggest, I believe it's tomorrow at 10 a.m., register for our software programming webinar. Then we'll talk about the PCOM network capabilities. So starting with our 4064 panel installation, as far as that cabinet goes, make sure you mount it to an interior wall. If you mount it to an exterior wall, make sure you have a vapor barrier in between, so that way condensation and stuff like that doesn't get on the control panel and will obviously short something out. Operating temperature, 32 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, not to exceed 85% humidity. Of course, make sure that the panel is properly grounded, and then the dimensions of the control panel is as follows right there on the screen. And if we take a look at the circuit board here and start talking about some of the terminals around the circuit board, the first one we have is that PCOM port. Again, this is how you're going to upload and download the configuration file to the control panel from your laptop. It's also how you're going to establish that IP communication. From there, we have that aux terminal, again, rated up to 1 amp. This is how you can utilize for door holder power, constant power, or even resettable power. Then we have our 6 initiating device circuits, again, if wired in Class B, or 3 if wired in Class A. And the one thing that I'll say that confuses people about these IDCs is the fact that there's the reference EOL terminals directly to the left of these circuits. And that confuses people because they assume that the reference EOL is for the IDCs. It's not. It's actually for the NAC circuits. So the reference EOL allows you to change the end-of-line reference from 2K to 27K, or anywhere within that value range, I should say. The default EOL for our systems is 5.1K. But again, if you put a reference EOL, say of 10K, it's now going to be looking for 10K on all of those output circuits. Then there's the P-Link circuit, which is a typical RS-45 connection of your plus, minus, A, and B for communication. And then the 4 programmable relays, and we'll talk more about these later, but typically programmed for alarm, trouble, supervisory, and water flow. Then the battery charging terminals. So when you guys are out doing your annual test inspection, you guys should be seeing 27.3 volts DC on these terminals, and that's with or without a load. So with the batteries connected or disconnected, you should see 27.3 volts DC. And then of course that 4x20 character display LCD screen, which is not bad for a smaller control panel. First thing we're going to talk about are those IDCs. So the conventional zones do come pre-programmed for Class B, and they come pre-programmed as the following. So you'll notice water flow for zone 1, tamper for zone 6, pull station for zone 3, etc. We get a lot of times where people will have something similar to this setup, and they'll call us on tech support and they'll say, well, I really want my smoke detector to be on zone 6 and my tamper to be on zone 2 because that's how I have it wired. Why create the extra trouble if you don't have to? I mean, move the wires. It's that easy. Or I should say that's the easiest method, but again, we do come pre-programmed for the following, which is on the screen. This is also shown on the data sheet and also shown in the manual of the control panel. As mentioned as well, it does come pre-programmed with a 5.1K end-of-line resistor value. If you want to be programmed as Class A, this is the default program for Class A, which is water flow for Zone 1 and Zone 2. So you'll notice there that the even number is the return circuit. So input 2, input 4, and input 6 are the return circuits for 1, 3, and 5. And remember, for a Class A circuit, no end-of-line resistor value is needed, or no end-of-line resistor is needed. All of these IDCs can be programmed for any of the following. You do not have to memorize this list. This is all actually either in the keypad programming, or again, if you're going to do it by the software in the computer, it's just a simple drop-down box and you can choose what each one of those circuits will be. Output configuration. So again, all of our outputs do come just like you probably attended Gary's webinar this morning. So all of our outputs across the board for all the Potter control panels are rated 3 amps at 24 volt DC. And we do that just to not confuse people. So if you're using our conventional power supply or smart power supply, or even this panel, it's 3 amps across the board. With that being said, again, you do have a 5 amp power supply total on this control panel. So if you go up to 3 amps on NAC 1, you only have 2 amps left over for the other 3 NACs. So typically we tell people not to max out that amperage on one notification circuit. Distribute it evenly if you can. And then of course the reference EOL, which can be referenced between 2 to 27K. The power is supervised and regulated, will reverse polarity upon activation, and again can be configured as any of the following. So from general purpose to your constant power, door holder power, resettable power, or those synchronized horn strobe circuits that I spoke about earlier. Talking about those synchronized horn strobe circuits, those output sync features. So we have selectable sync for AMSECO, wheel lock, Potter Gentex, or system sensor appliances. The system is also capable of quadrisync, so all 4 of these notification appliances will sync up visually system-wide. And again, that's just choosing the appropriate sync in the software or by the keypad. Relay programming, pretty straightforward. So all of the relays are rated 3 amps at 24 volt DC or 3 amps at 120 volt AC and can be programmed for the following on the screen. So alarm, supervisory, trouble, low AC, and water flow signals. The aux power rated terminals I talked about earlier, again mentioned earlier that they are rated up to 1 amp. They are 24 volt DC operation. Can be programmed for resettable power, door holder power, or I should mention that they come default for constant 24 volt power. Now, a lot of times we get the question of what's the difference between door holder and door holder low AC. And the difference is if you have standard door holder and you lose AC power to your control panel, those door holder, power is applied to those door holders continuously. So your battery calculations are going to be pretty huge. If you choose door holder low AC, it's going to drop door holder power at one of the pre-selected time intervals, which could be no delay, 15 seconds, 1 minute, or 5 minutes. And that's all chosen within the software. Battery connections. So again, charging voltage, as mentioned earlier, is 27.3 volts DC. And you should see that with your with the batteries connected or disconnected, it should see roughly 27.3 volts DC. I always tell people if you see that starting to dip down to the 26s, 25s, something may be starting to go wrong with that charging circuit. It doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong yet, but it's something to at least take note of. Batteries should be labeled sealed lead acid batteries, and the control panel enclosure will house up to two 12-amp-hour batteries. Now, this control panel will not house 18s. So whereas our addressable control panels will house 18s, typically don't house 12s, our conventional control panels won't house 18s and will house 12s. So it's the exact opposite here. They will charge up to 55 amp hour batteries though, and you can find complete battery calcs on our website to determine the battery size needed. And then of course, NFPA 72 says, hey, you need 24 hours of standby power followed by 5 minutes of alarm activation for a standard system. And then it's 24 and 15 if you have a voice system connected. Any questions so far? And again, if you have questions, please feel free to type those into the chat box. I'm probably just going to kind of keep rolling for your all's sake, for time purpose. Moving on to the next section though, which is the system accessories. Really what we're talking here are the P-Link modules. The current rating for the P-Link is 1 amp and it does operate on 24 volt DC. Gives you a maximum wire length of 6,500 feet if you're wired with the 14 gauge cable. So the maximum wiring distance again is 6,500 feet utilizing 14 gauge cable. We'll support up to 31 P-Link modules, and we'll talk about those modules here momentarily. And the nice thing is about the P-Link is the fact that it's fully supervised and power limited. What we mean by that, they're all addressable modules. So with the P-Link, you can T-tap it if necessary because they're all addressable. So the conventional circuits, the IDCs cannot be T-tapped, but the P-Link, because they are addressable, can be T-tapped. The first set of modules we have here are what you're going to see, I would say, in a typical system. The first one is the UD2000. This is going to give you the ability for that control panel to communicate over telephone lines. The second one here is the 4064. This gives you the ability to enable Class A for the P-Link and the notification circuits on board. And then the last one here on the screen is the IDC6. So this is going to provide expansion of IDC circuits for that control panel all the way up to 192 circuits total. Now, as far as how these install, so I would say these are the typical modules that would probably be installed on a system, and you can install these directly in the control panel enclosure. They would fit right behind the actual circuit board. The first one would be the UD2000. Which always gets mounted to the lower left. That is the only module that can actually get mounted in this location. The other two modules, which one would be the IDC6. These can get mounted in either location. So you can mount this up at the top, or the 4064 Class A card can get mounted to the bottom. And if you're not using utilizing Class A, you can mount two IDC6 cards within this cabinet if you wanted to. It could just be both mounted on the right-hand side, one at the top and one on the lower bottom right-hand side. But again, as far as that left-hand side mounting location, only the dialer can be mounted in that location. If you do need expansion cabinets, we do have those available as well, which are the AE2, which holds 2 accessory cards, the 8, which holds 8 cards, and the 14, which holds 14 cards. Even there, as you're expanding that system, you may need remote enunciators. The first one we have is the RA6075R, which is a 2x16 character display. Can be used with all of our control panels, whether it's addressable or the conventional. And the same goes for the RA6500R, except now it's a 4x40 character display. And the difference is the 6500R comes in multiple color options. So it comes in red, black, dark gray, or light gray. The 6500R also comes in a semi-flush format. So the 6075R only comes in red and surface mount only, while the 6500R comes in multiple options for color and mounting purposes. We also have an old style LED 16 display as well. So if you need the old school LED enunciator, we have that available, which gives you your typical LED enunciations for system status LEDs along with your alarm supervisor in trouble per zone. Then we have the ability to connect our smart power supply to this control panel, which provides you with 10 amps of power, 6 notification circuits, 2 dry contact inputs, and an isolated P-Link repeater, which I'll talk more about here in a second. So as far as that smart power supply, you can have up to 31 of these on any system. And it has that built-in isolated P-Link repeater. What this does is, if you heard me mention earlier, you have the capability of going up to 6,500 feet on the P-Link circuit. Well, this P-Link repeater basically repeats that for you. So if you need additional distance or amperage on the P-Link circuit, this will allow you to go an additional 1 amp or up to 6,500 feet. As you see there, again, provides you with 10 amps of power. That power can be spread between these 6 notification circuits. And these notification circuits can be programmed as anything that the onboard notification circuits can be programmed as. So, door holder power, selectable sync, constant power, resettable power, whatever it may be. And it's all done within the software. Now, I will say, if you're starting to add these P-Link modules, if you're not going to just have a basic little standalone system, you're going to be better off programming via the programming software on the laptop. It does have 2 dry contact inputs, so think of this as just 2 extra conventional zones. We'll say you can connect heat detectors, maybe monitor water flow switch, tamper switch. The only thing that you cannot do with these 2 dry contact inputs on the smart power supply is it will not accept 2-wire smoke detectors. And that's because they do not provide power output. This can be connected in either a Class A or Class B configuration. And there's the difference between the PSN1000 and PSN1000E is cabinet size. The PSN1000E allows you to mount 6 P-Link expansion cards, so whether it's the IDC 6 cards, within the cabinet itself. In addition to that, the smart power supply allows you to have programmable EOL. So you can also have different EOL values from 2K to 27K on the smart power supply. Next one is the DRV50. This provides 50 individually configured LED outputs. This is typically used for a large map or graphic display. So if you ever walked into a facility and they had a large map of the facility and a bunch of LEDs on there, typically those LEDs represent smoke detectors, heat detectors, things like that. So that way, if one of those detectors activates, it'll activate the LED on that map. Then from there, we do have the ROI5, which gives you 5 independently configured relays. These are rated 3 amps at 24 volt DC and 3 amps at 120 volt AC. And again, independently configured. So if you're doing elevator recall, you could put this in and you'll have a relay for primary recall, alternate, shunt trip, and fireman's hat, and still have a spare left over. And again, if you're getting into this type of configuration, you're going to be better off using the programming software. Our next 3 modules. So the first one is the FCB1000, gives you a remotely located Ethernet network connection. Not used too often, but again, what it is used for, instead of utilizing the Ethernet network connection on the control panel itself, you could remotely locate this, say in the network closet on the network rack, and it basically allows you to extend the P-Link over to the network rack instead of pulling data cable from the network rack to the control panel. Again, not used very often. Then from there, we do have the FIB1000. This allows you to convert that 4-wire P-Link bus to or from fiber optic cable. Now this uses an ST connector only and operates only with multi-mode fiber. So again, ST connector with multi-mode fiber. Then the last one we have on this page is the SPG1000. So I'm sure you guys still see those specifications out there that require printers. Just know that we do have a printer module available. and it will support both serial and parallel printer interface. Now, as far as all these P-Link modules go, again, they are addressable, and there's a different bucket of addresses available for each type of P-Link module. So what I mean by this, when you're putting that system together and you go to address this, see if I can get out my pin here. You can address the, say you have one IDC6, you can address that as one. The remote annunciator can be one. Even that smart power supply can be one. So as long as they're different type of modules, they can have the same addresses. Now, if it's a like type of module, so say you have 3 IDC6s, then you would have to go, 1, 2, and 3. And I apologize for my poor John Madden handwriting skills, but hopefully you get the point. So again, a different bucket of address available for each type of P-Link module. So that could be 1, 2, and 3. Annunciator could be 1. Smart power supply could be 1, and the panel's going to function normally. Now, as far as those addresses go, it's pretty straightforward. So it operates on binary format using dip switches from 1 to 31. And if you're not familiar with dip switch addressing or binary format, there's plenty of apps available out there for smartphones. Just do a little Google search or your Apple Store, and you're going to find plenty of free apps. And I would say don't buy one. There's plenty of free ones out there. As far as that P-Link cabling or wiring goes, though, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, plus to plus, minus to minus, A to A, B to B. And then, of course, out to the next device. We always get people saying, does it matter what color goes from, which one goes on A and which one goes on B? It doesn't really matter. It just has to match. So as long as, yellow's connected to A on this side and connected to A on that side, you're good to go. Again, I think if A is my positive, so I use my brighter color, and that's why I use yellow for my A. But you guys can do it however you need to, however it's going to work for you out in the field. Again, as long as it matches on both sides. Then don't forget to set that address, again, from 1 to 31, using that binary dip switch addressing. Any questions on this section while I take a drink of water? So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next section, which is basically typical panel startups. The first one's going to be without a computer, and the step would be to install all of your devices according to the pre-program that's already in the control panel. Then run a learn if necessary to learn in any P-Link modules that you've connected up, and then program it via the 4064 keypad. Test the system, should hopefully be good to go. And again, as mentioned earlier, if you do have multiple P-Link modules connected, it's going to be much easier to program this control panel with software on a laptop. And I'm not trying to put down any companies out there. I'm just still surprised this day and age how many companies that we get contacting us through tech support that a technician doesn't have a laptop, or each technician doesn't have a laptop. Especially, I mean, with this software, it doesn't take some special laptop. I mean, $150 at Walmart, you're going to have a laptop that's more than capable to do this. Typical panel startup with computer, which again is the recommended way, is to install the software on your laptop, install all the devices, again, run to learn via the control panel, upload the program to the computer, customize that program as needed within the software, and then download it back to the control panel, and then test the system. When you're connecting to the control panel like this, there's 2 different ways you can do it. So there's a direct connection, which you can use a straight through or patch cable, or a crossover cable will also work. And again, once you do it, once you connect to your laptop, an IP address is going to flash up on the screen. So it's going to say obtaining IP, private IP, IP configure, and it's going to flash Potter's private IP address of this 169.254.150.70. So that IP address never changes. So that is going to be the default IP address in every single control panel, unless you change it. Again, once that happens, connect to do an upload from the control panel. Once you have that, you can change anything that software is necessary. Again, I'm not really going to go through the software with you today because we have a different software webinar tomorrow that covers all of the different tab options on the left-hand side and how to upload and download, etc. But this is just kind of a glimpse of how the software, or what the software does look like. This slide shouldn't be there, but the next one is a type of network connection. So I told you there's two different types of connections. There's a direct connection and there's a network connection. So the network connection will be utilizing your customer's switch or network equipment. So you would plug into that the same way you would plug into your laptop, and then of course your laptop would be plugged into the same network equipment as well, or maybe operating over their Wi-Fi. Now once you have this, the IP address can be set two different ways in the control panel. So it does come default for DHCP, which is saying, hey, I'm going to go out and ask for an IP address from a host computer. That host computer is going to assign that control panel an IP address now. And it's the same process. It's going to come up, say, obtain an IP configured, and it's going to flash that IP address on the front of the control panel. Now, instead of the private IP address, you're going to utilize this IP address that's been given to you on the front of the control panel. Again, this is only if you're going through a network, though. Otherwise, I would say probably 95% of the time, you're going to use that private IP address that Potter gives you. When either utilizing the direct or the network connection, it does say that in the software that you can utilize the net BIOS name when uploading and downloading. This used to work every single time flawlessly, but when Windows 10 came out and some of the later Windows 10 packages, something with what Windows is doing as far as being able to utilize net BIOS configurations, because we're not the only one that utilizes this. Windows is kind of getting rid of allowing computers to utilize this for communication purposes. So again, you may see where we say that you can utilize this, but I'm sitting here telling you, don't use it. You'll probably lead to headaches. Just utilize the IP address. And that IP address can be found in the System Tools menu, Ethernet status, or again, unplug the cable, plug it back in. It's going to flash it on the front of the screen for you. And the nice thing is, if you do have that control panel plugged into a network, you can utilize the email portion of the control panel. So all of the 4064 control panels come with built-in email. That email address is going to look like the following. So it's going to start with PFC 4064, some digits at potterlink.com. So for example, it looks like this. Now, of course, if you would see this, just a little tidbit of information, you'll see that 1005 there, and this is just going off the side rail here. That means that this would actually be the 5th control panel that came off of production. So our first 1,000 addresses, so 0 to 1,000 is actually saved for internal testing, internal uses. Anything after 1,000 is actually production numbers. So if you end up seeing a production number out there of 2,339, that means that's the 1,339th control panel processed. So not that you guys need to know that information, just kind of throwing it out there. Out of the box, ready to send and receive emails though. Up to 20 different recipient email addresses can be entered or stored into the program and software at any given time. And again, I will say this is something that you have to do within the software. Don't try and do it through the keypad. It's going to be very cumbersome and take you forever. Using the software, you can configure what email addresses can be sent to each email address, such as status emails, history reports, and even test signals. You can also use that software to configure which email address can request information on demand, such as history reports, or even the software configuration file, or even status files. So you can get a little glimpse of, what the smoke detectors look like, whether they're dirty or not on the system. And I should say that's mainly only for the addressable control panels as far as the status on the smoke detectors, so I apologize. But when using the addressable control panel, so you can get a status and it tells you how dirty the smoke detectors are. But you can get status emails from this, which give you alarm, trouble, supervisory conditions. They are sent when the condition occurs, and they may or may not contain more than one event. The other thing I would say is, as far as they may or may not contain more than one event, it all depends on how close the alarm or supervisor trouble conditions are. So if they're within 10 seconds, they're probably going to be in the same email. If they're greater than 10 seconds apart, they'll probably be in separate emails. The other thing to note, these are not intended to alert the authorities. So you still need to send signals to a central station. I've had several people over the years say that, oh, great, email. I can just email the fire department. No, you can't. You need to send signals to the central station like everyone else would. History reports can be scheduled for daily, weekly, or monthly. Can be attached to the emails, either a text or Excel file, and they're pretty small in size. We always get the people worried about how large they are, and these things are like kilobytes, so very, very small in size. You can have up to 8 different scheduled emails programmed in your system, from yearly all the way down to daily. You can also include a custom email with each one. Say, it could be a Happy New Year, could be, thank you for being our customer. It could be, dear customer, your system is due for its annual test inspection. Please contact Joe at ABC Company at 555-555-5555. You can also include a history or status file with these. Now with those, you wouldn't want to send that to your customer. That would be sent to yourself. And the reason why you would do that to yourself is because it gives you a little bit of knowledge of what's happening with the system, whether it's had any troubles before you go out and do the annual test inspection, maybe something needs to get replaced, etc. These can be sent up to 20 different recipients, and a total of 40 email addresses can be stored in the programming software at any given time. And a glimpse at what this looks like is the following. And again, in this one, we're just giving a typical annual test inspection due. Reminder, please contact this company to set up an appointment. The other thing I'll say you can do with this control panel is utilize the Potter Facility Management Tool software, or FMT software. This is compatible across all Potter control panels. So whether it's the AFC, IPA, or the conventional 4064 or 6006 control panels, you can connect up to 255 control panels from anywhere in the world via the LAN, WAN, or internet. It also allows you to remotely view, sort, or print those file system events, and you can export those to Excel or Word documents directly through the software itself. Has a built-in keypad emulator, which allows you to interact with the system's history. So you can pull up this emulator and cycle through the history just as if you're standing in front of the control panel. Now, I will say, in order to use this FMT software, you would have to have a static IP address at the control panel. And then, of course, that's what you would use within the software, so that way it would give you the ability to view the software at any given time. And if you don't know the difference between static and DHCP IP, sorry, good Lord, I apologize. If you do not know the difference between static IP addresses and dynamic or DHCP IP addresses, dynamic changes ever so often. It could change daily. It could change next week, next month, next year. You don't know exactly when it's going to change, but it's going to change at some period in time. A static IP address stays that IP address indefinitely until someone physically changes it again. So again, if you're going to utilize a software like the FMT, you're going to want to put a static IP address so that IP address never changes. And I would say, if there's any questions, and while we're waiting for any questions, before I kind of go over the little overview, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up, open the website, pottersignal.com, of course, go to training, and then training videos under the fire alarm systems training. Just in case, if you guys don't know, we do have a library of videos for the 4064 control panels. So while I didn't cover keypad programming today was just more of an overview. How's it work? what's the limitations on it, etc. We do have 4 videos available which explain to you how to program notification circuits, points, software zones, or even the dialer programming via the keypad. So I would suggest going and watching those videos if you have questions about keypad programming. Now, as far as finishing this up, again, the 4064 overview, we talked about the fact that the 4064 comes with 6 programmed IDC circuits and board. That's if wired in Class B, or 3 if wired in Class A, expandable to 192 circuits. Does have a 5 amp power supply built in, which contributes to the 4 notification circuits. Those notification circuits have selectable sync for Potter Gentex, AMSECO, system sensor, and wheel lock appliances. Also has a programmable aux power circuit, which can be used for constant power, resettable power, door holder power. That is rated up to 1 amp and operates at 24 volt DC power. And I'm seeing a hand go up and down in the attendee section. So again, if you do have a question, please feel free to type that into the chat box and I will answer that if you do have a question, or maybe you accidentally hit your hand, I'm not sure. For 4 configurable relays, again, typically set up for alarm, trouble, supervisory, and water flow. And then, of course, the fact that this supports the P-Link modules, I think, is the one of the greatest things that we did with this conventional control panel, so that we can use our addressable P-Link modules for the addressable panels and use it for this conventional panel. And the reason why I find that great is maybe you go into a system that they have a 4064 control panel installed, and then years down the road, that 4064 is no longer large enough. Well, now you can trade it out for an addressable control panel, which has that expansion capabilities. Built-in Ethernet port, which is listed as a sole path communicator. So again, you can use it for that UL listed IP communicator to the central station, or utilize the email capabilities of the control panel. The 4x20 character display on the front of the control panel, again, is programmable via the laptop, which is what we recommend, or you can utilize keypad programming. Now, one thing I have not mentioned yet is the fact that it does come with a 5-year warranty. So again, all of our fire alarm control panels, anything across the board, we'll say a fire alarm, comes with a 5-year factory warranty. Now, question here is, do the aux and NAC circuits reset when we reset the panel? And the answer is yes. Of course, unless that aux circuit is set up as constant power. So if you want it to be reset when you reset the control panel, say you're powering duct detectors off of it, you'd want to set that up as resettable power. So so that way it gives you constant power until you hit reset, then it's going to trigger power to those duct detectors. So it's going to cut power out momentarily for about 10 seconds upon reset. So good question there. And I'll say that basically concludes the webinar. I will stick around for an additional 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes, just in case there's any questions. So I'll stick around till, we'll say 2:40 p.m. Central Time, just in case there is any other questions. And again, if you guys do have any other questions beyond the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us at training@pottersignal.com. And we can answer those. And as far as those questions go, I mean, it could be questions about the product. It could be even when I say about the product, could be just how's the product worked, or will this product fit this scenario?